guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. This video is going to be a bunch of my literature recommendations based on very specific vibes, and you'll see how that is in a minute, but I'm very excited to kind of touch upon this. I miss my book content. I have not been like an avid reader that well for like a minute, so very glad to be back with some book content. But first, I have something I really wanted to talk about with you guys. Okay, to preface this, I am pro-Palestine. I will always be pro-Palestine. I am pro the liberation movement for Palestinians in Gaza. So I want to extend out a course to you guys from the Palestinian Youth Movement. It is called Understanding Zionism. So this is a 6-part course. I'll have their picture thing up right here. But basically, it's just about understanding Zionism, the origins, what it is rooted in, and it's very exciting. I'm very excited to be a part of this because it's always really important to be engaged in your community and to learn and to grow, especially if you are like planning to advocate and speak loudly and to be the voice for people who currently do not have one, or to even uplift the voices of people who need their voices heard. And so I wanted to extend this course. I will be partaking in it. I have the information here. It is hybrid, so you can participate in person if you live in New York, or online, which I think is through Zoom. And they'll also have the videos available afterwards of the recording, so you can also kind of do a bit of a self-study thing. But I really encourage, if you have to do it virtually, to do the Zooms. But obviously, it's a schedule thing as well, but it's from April 29th to May 16th. The reason why this is so important is because we must equip ourselves with a deep understanding of the very project that seeks to destroy the Palestinian people and those who stand with them. Join the Palestinian Youth Movement, the People's Forum, and other popular educators in a rigorous study to strengthen our engagement in the Palestinian cause. Very important to just be active in your community and to learn. And I hope you guys join the program as well. I will be a part of it, so I will also bring it up. I think it's really important for me to kind of extend this kind of opportunity out to people, especially just because while I am kind of very fresh and new to like YouTube and recording, I think I've built kind of a bit of a community on here, and I think it's really important for me to also use my voice to uplift that and to extend opportunities as well that I am very passionate about and that I care about, because I want to foster a community that also definitely does align with me in this sense. I hope that makes sense. That was kind of a ramble, but I hope you guys are to join it. I'll have the link to the sign up in the description. It'll be the first thing in the link, so you'll see it. And I really encourage you guys to participate. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Another thing that I wanted to read off to kind of also explain why it's so important is because from the Nakba of 1948 to the ongoing US-Israeli genocide on Gaza, the brutal reality of Zionism has exposed itself for the world to see. In the face of the global support for the Palestinian liberation, Israel has declared its next front of war to be public opinion, allocating $150 million for propaganda efforts to reshape Zionism's bloody image on the world stage. You have to be aware of the way things are currently, so that like these efforts of changing your mind or to look better, to uplift like the Zionist movement, does not work. It's like a conscious effort to also not be susceptible to this propaganda. That's also what I wanted to add. So yeah. Okay, so our very first category, we have grotesque, nasty, gross, and a little bit cannibalistic. 2 of these books don't align with that last part of cannibalism, but the rest do. We're going to start off with Ghost Eaters by mcleod Chapman. This concept was really interesting to me. It's a really fantastic book, but it is very gross. Like, I remember reading this, and then I talked about it with my English teacher, and we were like, ew, that is so gross. It's very nasty, but I thought it was a really great book. I really quite enjoyed it. Basically, the plot of this book is Aaron has an ex-boyfriend named Silas, and Aaron constantly keeps having to bail Silas in and out of rehab, and it's a struggle, and it very much sucks. One day she tries to have an intervention for him. It doesn't work out, and eventually she's like, I cannot keep doing this. I will not keep bailing you out. That same day that they have that big spat, that argument, Silas dies. And then one of her friends, or one of their mutual friends, introduces her to a drug called Ghost, which essentially, once you take it, it lets you see dead people. And she feels like she really didn't get closure with Silas, and so she takes it, and then she gets to see Silas. Like I said, it does get cannibalistic. I think it's near like the second half or like the latter end of the book, but it's there if that's the theme that you guys want to see. For some reason, books that I read very typically end up cannibalistic one way or another, and it's very, very intriguing. But I thought this book was really interesting. It's very gross. When I say gross, I mean gross. There's a whole thing with like the ghost, like the actual ghost, not the pill. They're attracted to the pill, and when like apparently like in this book, when you take the drug, it'll like seep out of your pores, and then there's a bunch of ghosts licking up the pores. It's very, very gross. So if you guys are very interested in nasty kind of books, this would be very much up your alley. Next, we have Perfume by Patrick Suskind. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but this is a very fantastic book. It is about a person who was born with like really, really fantastic like smell, but then he was, or what's it called? Olfactory senses. So he can smell things really well, like literally everything down to a T. This is a very interesting book with a very, very intriguing arc. Like it was a very bit of a strange like plot, but basically he was born with like no actual odor, like he doesn't smell like anything, so that makes him like a bit invisible. And then he is very great with smell, and then he utilizes that throughout his lifetime to kind of achieve different goals. His goal was to become a perfumer, and he got a lot of experience for that. But then he started, or there's a point in the book, I don't want to spoil, but it's really, really gross, and this is a part of the plot, so you'll get there. But it's called Perfume, right? The story of a murder. He learns that scent is such a good way to kind of change the way that you're perceived by people, because it's such like a subconscious thing. Like if you smell something good, then you'll view of it positively. He adjusts his smell based on the tiniest, littlest things ever, so that he can be uplifted. But then there is a certain demographic that exudes a really great scent, and he learns how to get the scent off of human bodies, and then he utilizes that, which is really crazy. It's a really fantastic book. I think it also touches upon like ego and like arrogance and this imagination of what you could achieve, but it really doesn't match up to what you think it is. Very gross though, and it's very cool. I like this book a lot. Okay, next we have Bones and All by Camille deangelis. I love the movie a lot more than I like the book, but I like the book in its own right. It's a really fantastic book. Again, this one very much cannibalistic. That's really the whole plot of it. But I thought this book was really great in its own right. I think it's a lot better in exploring like a teenage girl's like kind of life and her own experiences. But basically, if you don't know anything about Bones and All is about people who are born eaters, and what that is just cannibals. Like they thrive off of eating, and like it's like this like intrinsic part of them that desires to eat like human flesh, and it's very intriguing. If you okay, the movie definitely comes off a little bit more of a romantic movie that kind of is like all consuming love, like it like actually consumes you, or like that kind of thing. This is very, very different from the movie, just letting you guys know. But it's really fantastic. It's also a lot of grappling with like relationships with men, and like allowing people to get close to you. And it's like instead of like the all-consuming love like the movie is kind of about, this book is kind of about how as a whole like you kind of are like a void that kind of sucks up everything around you. And it's really intriguing, and it's very, very sad in my book, but it's also a little bit nasty. But the nastier parts are definitely omitted. Like there's no like actual written parts of eating. It's kind of written as like a blank space, kind of. Enjoyed Bones and All in its own right. Do not go into it expecting anything like the movie, because it's a lot different. But I think if you go in without expectations of like what the movie kind of provides, then you'll have a good time with it. Okay, next we have Tender as a Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. I always end up recommending this book one way or another because I think this book is pretty fantastic and kind of touching upon like the society that has been developed in this book, how humans just kind of figure out ways of survival regardless of any issues, and I think that's really interesting. But I think what was most interesting was the main character of this book. He is pretty nasty as an individual. I think he really tries to detach himself throughout the book in his role in like the human breeding eating system, but he's like a key integral part of like the way that it works. Like he's a really big part of the way that the whole system works, and I think that's really interesting. I think this book ended the perfect way that, wait, I don't want to spoil. Okay, just know that this book is pretty fantastic. I'm sure you've heard good things about it if you're on any like kind of literature circles. I think it's worth a read. I wouldn't say this is a 5-star book, but I do think it brings up a lot of different like issues, and I think it brings up a very, very great like question, I guess, on like humanity and what we do to kind of survive, and is it really moral. But I do know that this book, I think, is about like veganism and not eating meat and animal meat. Anyways, Tender as a Flesh, really fantastic read. I would recommend it. Now, these are the books in this category, but they're not cannibalistic. First of all, we have Baby Teeth. This was recommended to me, by Zoje Stage. This was recommended to me by my beloved friend Vincent. Very fantastic book. I think it's really intriguing. It took me a minute to get into this book, but this book is kind of about Freudianism and like Freud psychology and stuff. But rather than like the Oedipus complex, it is the counterpart of it, which is like the Electra complex. So rather than a son having feelings for his mother and then resenting the father, it's a kind of the flip side where it's the daughter loving the father and then resenting the mother. That's just kind of it as like a baseline, but that's what this book is about, and it's very interesting. I would say this is pretty gross because the actions that are taken in this book by the daughter who absolutely hates her mother is really, really insane to me, especially if you like especially when you remember that this is like supposed to be a kid doing this stuff, and like it's supposed to be a kid actually like trying to murder like her mom just for the sake of her dad's like, or being her dad's like sole object of affection, if that makes sense. I thought Baby Teeth was really interesting. I think one scene that always like freaks me out, or one part of the book that always freaks me out, is oh, again, I cannot spoil, but then it's with like the little pin tacks. That always icks me out in a way that is terrible to me. Our next category, this one is really, really brief. These are my favorite sci-fi books. As someone who very rarely reads sci-fi, I don't really touch sci-fi. It's not really like my go-to category, but it's not one I'm necessarily opposed to. It's just not one that I reach for. So let's talk about that. On my lights, because my room is starting to get dark and I wasn't enjoying that anymore. Now we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I think I've talked about this book before. I definitely have, and I've spoken pretty highly of it, except for the ending. I thought the ending was absolute nonsense. It really was absolutely dumb, and I really didn't like that. But I think I still really enjoyed this book because I thought it was really fun to read through. I really bonded and connected with the character, and also I was reading this book because someone recommended it to me. So I was reading this book and I was talking to someone who had also read it, so that we like definitely bonded and chatted over it, which I think makes the reading experience a lot more enjoyable. But basically, this book is Ryland Grace is the sole survivor in a space mission to save Earth, and basically the sun is getting hotter, things are going wrong on Earth, and this is a last-ditch attempt to basically go on Earth, or to go into space, find a solution, save Earth. He's the only one alive. He does not have his memories. He does not remember a singular thing. So he has to try to figure out what to do and save the Earth. And I really quite like this book because he's not alone. We meet a creature. I'm saying this just because I think it's in the very early like stages of the book, but he meets an alien and he bonds with the alien, and it's really fantastic. I think if you like sci-fi, I think you really might enjoy this. I know this book though has definitely gotten high reviews as is, so you might have already heard about it. If you haven't given it a read, let this be your sign. You should definitely give it a read. I really quite like this book. The ending might disappoint you, but I do think the book is still worth it, even with the disappointing ending. For the next book, we have Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. This is about a man who figures out a way to become invisible, so he utilizes that to the best of his ability, but then he like eventually realizes it's not really what it was made out to be, and then it's a whole amalgamation of like different events, different things happening. He stays at a hotel, he covers up as much as possible to pretend he's like an actual person, because clothes are still visible but his physical body isn't, so he tries to get away with a bunch of things. He eventually gets caught, things happen, and then the ending was really like is what really tied it together for me. I feel like I don't know if I completely explained the plot really well. I think there were some portions of this book where I kind of felt like I was fighting to get through it, but I still think the book is really worth the read because the ending was just so good, and it was genuinely really devastating, because I do not want to spoil, but it just really makes you look at yourself more and then think about like how you really view things with like hatred and violence, and kind of reevaluate that kind of thing, because I think a lot of us, or majority of us hopefully, kind of experience some semblance of just negativity and hatred, and I think that's perfectly normal, but it's also just like, for me, this is kind of a call to kind of reevaluate how you view things and how you kind of perceive things and your reaction to that kind of thing. I thought this book was really fantastic though. That list was really short, but we're moving on. I don't really read a lot of science fiction, that's why. But we're moving on to our next category, which I label as philosophical and utterly life-changing. This is just how I feel about these books, and I think these books are really fundamental to me, and I viewed these books very highly. We're going to start off with the book that I actually do not have physically, again, library book, but this book was The Fall by Albert Camus. I've already spoken about this book before, and I will always speak upon it very highly. It's about a man who is talking with a man in the bar, and this man is drunk off his ass, and then he kind of just reveals a bunch of different things about himself and the experiences that he's had, and then you really realize the true extent of people and individuals in this kind of interaction, and it really makes you evaluate the truth on how you view interactions with others, how you view yourself, that kind of thing. I do have notes on this book, so I will kind of reference why it was really life-changing for me, or personally why I love this book so much. Okay, I have different bullet points for why I really quite like this book. First of all, it really does make you face your hypocrisy, because there are a bunch of different things throughout the book where it's stuff that I think everybody in this world has experienced, and I think you're like lying if you haven't, truly. And then secondly, it really makes you think about the truth behind the truth of people behind a facade of the generosity that they uphold. And I think genuinely everybody in the world will uphold like a facade of kindness and generosity and just good etiquette, which I don't think means that it's necessarily fake. You just kind of create like, you kind of curate yourself when you present yourself out into the world, and I think that's perfectly normal. That makes sense, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. It just means that you are consciously upholding like a facade of yourself out into the world. And I will admit, like, the way that I act on YouTube and on camera is a lot different from the way I act with my friends, but the way I act with my friends is different from the way I act with my family, and then the way that I act around other people is different from the way I act when I'm alone. Not necessarily a bad thing, it just really makes you think about that though. I have a couple different quotes that I wanted to talk about. Oh, here, okay, this is one thing that I think everybody has done, but I'll read you guys the quote first and then divulge. We rarely confide in those who are better than we. More often, on the other hand, we confess to those who are like us and who share our weaknesses. Hence, we don't want to improve ourselves or be bettered, something like that. For we should first have to be judged in default. We merely wish to be pitied and encouraged in the course we have chosen. I think everybody has kind of picked and chosen who they kind of spoke to in regards to different situations, and that's perfectly okay. Sometimes you need to hear different things from different people, but I think it's really just a reevaluation on why do you do this, why are you doing this, and it's helped me a lot. And I think the reason why I think this book was so life-changing is because it makes me think so hard on like the interactions I have with people, on who I truly am and how I present myself out into the world, and the validity of that. Because while I think when I say facade, it might just be like, okay, you're like a fake persona. I think to some extent there are facades that can be wildly different from yourself, and then some facades that are going to be connected with yourself still. Like, when I am keeping a facade, am I like just being so genuinely like inauthentic, or am I just keeping aspects of myself still there, but just in a more, or in a different manner, if that makes sense? Okay, to prevent myself from going on and on and on about the fall for 10 different years, we're going to move on to Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger. You may know J.D. Salinger from Captain the Rye. I liked Captain the Rye, but I quite liked Franny and Zoe a lot better than that. I really think the dynamics of relationships and family and all that jazz is done really fantastically in this book. J.D. Salinger's prose and the way that he writes, it's just really beautiful as well. I connected really fantastically with Franny, and I thought Zoe was such an interesting guy. By the way, for context, these two are siblings, and then we just learn about their family dynamic and how they interact with their family and everything that kind of plagues them, especially because there's been a loss in the family. They kind of are just constantly grappling with that over and over and over again, and it's so incredibly like devastating in a way that I just thought was so beautiful. I think why this book is really like fantastic for me is because it talks a lot about ego and connections with other people and familial dynamics and all that stuff, but definitely with the ego part there's a lot of isolation, and I think that connected with me a lot because I don't want to play in like this very like holier than thou, like I'm better than people or like that kind of thing. But I do think that I think it's also partially motivated by my age group. I do not feel very connected with a lot of people in the fundamental ways that I prefer to be connected with people. I think partially it's like political wise, intellectual wise, maturity levels, that kind of thing, because I'm in high school still, and still I really feel like the people around me are not really people that align with me in the way that I would really prefer. And that's okay. Everybody's different. I found my group of people that I really adore, but I do think it is still very, very isolating to feel so fundamentally different from a lot of other people and to not align with people in the ways that are so like significant to you. And so this talks a lot about it because I think to an extent, like the way that I'm feeling, it is a bit of an egotistical thing. I'm trying not to come off as like, oh, I'm so like niche and different and so all of this stuff. I really don't think I am. I think I'm very similar to a lot of people in a lot of ways, but I think this kind of touches upon that ego and isolation that comes along with it, especially in the first half where Franny, or well, during Franny's part, where she talks about like, I want to talk to someone I can respect. I usually don't leave sticky notes in books, but when I do, that means I had something to say about it. This is during Zoe's portion. I love the self-deprecation because I so deeply relate to this self-awareness, but I'm also facing this impossibility to change. But at the end of the day, what it is, it's a surface level awareness of my negative behaviors without with no true reflection and no true intent to change. I've kind of dealt with this feeling a lot where I feel very incredibly stagnant, but then I just complain, and I stay within that kind of form, or within that like kind of spot, which I do think I've gotten a lot better with, but nonetheless it's something I definitely deal with a lot. Another one is, I said that Zoe is my favorite because I love that he emits things so authentically. I think he was such a real character, and I thought he was really, really fantastic to read. This is a really great book. I think it's also very like a relatively short read, but I left me with so many different feelings and emotions, and I really cannot even begin to encapsulate everything that I feel about this book. So yeah, Franny and Zoe, great book. Unfortunately, I cannot reference the next one because I don't have it physically, but it is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Marie Rilke. I think this book is really, really cute and sweet, and it's really short. I think the parts of it that I appreciated the most were its encouragement of appreciating monotony and appreciating the mundane things and the little things, because in finding and creating an appreciation for the little things of your life and your experiences, you create such fondness for the world that really motivates art and the things that you create and what you put out into the world. I really quite enjoy that, and I think there's also an encouragement of enjoying the process itself. Everything that you do is a process. Everything is a process, and you really just kind of have to enjoy that, because that is really what makes up the entirety of life, is just going through the experiences that come with every individual journey that you may try to pursue within your lifetime. Next, we have I Who Have Never Known Men, which is probably one of my favorite books of all time. It's incredibly depressing and bleak and melancholic, and it's sad. So basically, this book is about like 40 women in a bunker. So pre-bunker was like our typical normal society, but now that they're in the bunker, it's just the bunker. Like, that's all there is to it. This book is really interesting because there are a lot of questions that will never ever get answered. Like, many of the questions that you may have about the circumstances of the bunker, on why there's a bunker, on why, like, what prompted the bunker, never gets answered, like, ever. Like, it really doesn't, and you kind of just have to live with that, which is really interesting to me. What I think was like my favorite parts of this book was seeing the relationship between the main character and all the other women in the bunker, because all the other women in the bunker are old enough to remember the world before the bunker, or to vaguely remember the world before the bunker. So they still maintain a lot of like the patriarchal kind of beliefs and values, or just an over critical kind of eye on themselves. And then our character does not know any of that, does not even like comprehend any of that. She's never known men, she's never known nothing. And then she like sees all of the ways that the other women like act and the way that they are, and she doesn't get it because she's so far removed from a society that kind of pushed the idea of that critical or internal like criticism out onto the world. What was I just saying? She has never experienced a society that has motivated that internal criticism onto women. This book is really fantastic. You are going to be left with questions. You're just going to have to accept that. And it's really beautiful and it's very fantastic. And I really love this book so much. Next category is on love, intimacy, and relationships as a non-romance reader. These are different books that kind of touch upon intimacy, love, experiences with love and relationships. And yeah, this category is very interesting because it's not romance. I do not very much read romance. These all kind of come with different kind of lessons or different information. We'll start though with Henry and June. I tabbed this book to hell and back for some reason. This book took me like 4 months to read. I didn't love this book, but I do think this book is really, really intriguing. I think this was definitely just not for me at the time that I read it, because I was like just constantly like it was like a slog to like get through this book. But this book is really interesting. It's such an intriguing dynamic on the passion of love and intimacy, and especially in this book where it's like about an affair, which I kind of have a lot of books about, which is very interesting. But essentially, this book is by Anais Nin. So Anais becomes friends with this couple. She's married to a man named Hugo. This is her diary, by the way. So she's married to Hugo. She becomes friends with Henry and June. She starts to feel something for June and the way that she is, and how she's kind of a blank slate, like a blank individual, and she really loves June. But then June is out of the picture temporarily. She begins a relationship with Henry, and she admires his intellectualism and like his brain and his intelligence and all that stuff. She begins to bond with him and has an affair with him. She basically just has like a bunch of different connections, relations with people, and it's a very interesting book if you kind of want to just talk, like, find about the grappling of relationships and intimacy and all that stuff. And like, this book is really interesting actually, because it's partially it's less about like the relationship aspect, but also how it affects her and her well-being and her brain and her mind, because she begins to like kind of analyze the decisions behind this, she begins to analyze the feelings that happen when she kind of continues the affair and connects with other men that way. It's a very intriguing read. I would recommend this. Like I said, it is a bit of a slog to get through. It's kind of dense, but I think it's well worth it to give it a try. Anna Easton is very fantastic as a writer, and I really would like to read more of her stuff and to get into reading more of her stuff, because I think this book, while at the time that I read it I didn't love it, I really do still view it very highly. So yeah, Henry and June. Okay, next we have First Love by Ivan Turgenev. This book is a really interesting read. It's about a 16-year-old who is basically just falls in love with it for the first time with his new neighbor, who's a 21-year-old woman. And it's very surreal because this 21-year-old woman, the best way that I can word this is that she has a harem of like just a bunch of older men that kind of entertain her. It's very gesture like. It feels like she has like a bunch of little court jesters that kind of play games with her and stuff. And then our little main character, our 16-year-old, kind of joins that group. And it's a very, like I said, very surreal, because there's a lot of different aspects where it's like, what is happening? Why are you in this? Why are you allowing yourself to stay in this situation that's just so incredibly weird? And it's a very great read, I think, if you just kind of like exploring like the dynamics of like being in love, being in a one-sided love, because that's what it is that he's experiencing. And I think it's also like a motivation or kind of a reminder to reevaluate your connections with other people, because there's different things in this book, like he knows that this connection that he has with her is not going to go anywhere, because there's like a part where he's imagining that he's going to partake in this heroic act that's going to help her and save her, but then he's going to die in the process. My thought process when reading that was like, why would you not rather than imagine a heroic act that will end with a happily ever after? It's because he knows that it's not going to go the way that he really wants it to go, or he knows at the end of the day it's not going to end up anywhere. And it's a very interesting thing in like a message of just knowing when to go and kind of knowing when to reevaluate your connection with another person and whether it's actually going to be good for you or not. And there's a crazy twist at the end that I kind of anticipated, but this book is like 100 pages, and I anticipated like page 70, and I got revealed like page 75. Crazy twist. Just know that it's like absolutely insane, and then when you read it you're like in awe, because it's like, whoa, you kind of can anticipate it, but then you're also just like left with like the fact that that's like really insane way to treat, like that's just an insane thing to do and to be a part of and to partake in. This book is very insane though, in like a few pages. It's very particularly short. I would really quite recommend this book. Yeah. Okay, next is our non-fiction section. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but that's okay. This is Our Prisons Obsolete by Angela Y. Davis. I think I've definitely talked about this book before. I have, because it was one of my 5-star books of 2024. So if you've seen my previous book videos, you may have heard of this book already, or you've heard me sing my praises about this book. Our Prison's Obsolete is such a fantastic book, and kind of reconstructing your thought process on the prison complex and the prison system, because I think one really significant thing that this book kind of brings up is how the prison systems are so integrated within our like society. You can't even imagine a world where there is no prisons. But while it's so like, it's kind of like a shadow, because it's always there. There are always prisons, but people don't even really want to acknowledge or converse about the fact that there is the prison system. And it's a very interesting thing, because it's in like this in between where it's like, of course it's there, but also like, let's not really talk about it so much, or to really reflect on it. This book is really quite interesting. It's also relatively short, but I kind of engaged so much with this book, and I think it's very incredibly fantastic if you just kind of want to reevaluate our system further, in like more radical ways. And if you're gonna think of that question where it's like, well, what do we do then with like murderers and like these terrible people if we don't have the prison system? There is a chapter at the end that addresses that, and so I think you should also touch upon that. Okay, next we have An Unquiet Mind by K. Redfield Jameson. this book is basically about bipolar. The bipolar disorder is a memoir of Kay Redfield Jamison's experiences with it, but I'm going to be referring to it as manic depressive illness because that's how she's referring to it herself. So I will kind of refer to it in that way to respect that, because I think there is a portion in the book where she's like, I prefer this term because I think it reflects further on what this disorder or like this illness truly is. This is basically her kind of detailing all of her life experiences growing up or like changing and growing with this illness. And it's a very intriguing read because it touches upon all these like different aspects of it as well, like her relationships, the way she connected with other people, her kind of pursuing education within a time where like maybe this could have prevented her from being able to pursue education. It's a really fantastic read. I read this on my plane ride to Vietnam, and I literally like bawled. Like I literally was like just crying because there was just so much about this book that kind of made me feel so deeply as well, that it was just really fantastic read. And I think if you're kind of interested in just like this kind of thing or reading about like this kind of thing, I think you might quite enjoy this. I really want to read more memoirs over time as well. So yeah, there's this book. Wait, before I end off this video, because that's it for the categories. Sorry, I should have clarified that. But before I end off this video, I want to tell you guys what I am currently reading. Currently, I've not been finishing books, but I have been reading quite a bit. Right now I'm reading Too Pretty to Be Good by Lindsay Bryan, and the reason why I got the book was because Lindsay Bryan herself posted an excerpt of it onto Substack, and I read it and I thought it was really fantastic, so I picked up a copy. But basically it's memoirs on her being a stripper and her growing up with like all these kind of, or growing up with all this kind of admiration for the women around her and her concepts of love and relationships, all that kind of stuff. It's a very intriguing read. I'm kind of grappling with it a lot because it's a lot of very different, or it kind of differs from the way I would maybe perceive the situation that she lived in, but it's very interesting and it's very fantastic, and I think it's so great to kind of also internalize and like learn a lot about other people's experiences and all their lives and stuff, and it's very cool. I think it's a very intriguing read. I'm also reading Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson, and this book is so intriguing because well, it's also really funny. It's so funny, and the way that it's written is so incredibly visceral and interesting, and it also definitely touches upon like the concepts of love and stuff, despite the fact it's kind of a plot that would differ from the kind of concepts of love that we kind of think of. But just for some context, the narrator is genderless and nameless, and it's very interesting because for some reason they're so drawn to married women, and basically the book though is kind of detailing, or is them detailing their experiences with their beloved Louise, who is a married woman. But it's very, very intriguing in that aspect, and it's also, like I said, so funny. Here's a quote that I sent to my friend because it just really made me giggle. But basically it's a doctor saying to the narrator, you know, love is a very, very beautiful thing, but there are clinics for people like you. And then, now it's a serious matter to have pervert written on your NHS file. And I was giggling about it because I just thought it was really silly. But yeah, this book so far, I'm not super deep into that one, but I think it's really funny and I think it's really interesting. Just so far. For some reason, I end up picking up books that are about cheating, or kind of about cheating and affairs and stuff. Okay, I wanted to chat with you guys really quick before I actually ended the video because I had book updates right then and there, and I was talking about the book that I was reading, Too Pretty to Be Good. I actually finished that book the day after I recorded that, and I thought it was so good. It was so fantastic. I was kind of experiencing and feeling a bunch of different emotions while reading it because I was just kind of grappling, because I was like, wow, this is such like a intriguing way to experience things and to live things and to think about things. But I think the last like 30 to 40 pages had me genuinely bawling my eyes out because it was so beautiful. It was such an acknowledgement of trauma and of your previous thought process and experiences, and I just truly thought it was so beautiful. I really recommend that memoir. I think you should definitely read it. It was just so fantastic, and I'm so grateful that the author posted like the excerpts that had me hooked onto it, that made me want to get it in the first place, that made me want to read it, because I just am so very much in awe of the book and by her writing style and her prose. It was definitely like a page turner. Like, I was so into it and I loved it so much. Like, I think it took me a minute to get into it personally. That was because I was in a reading slump, but once I got myself out of that, I was just enamored with this book, and like I was just going at it and going at it, and I was actually finishing it during my school day, and during my like third period class I was reading it and I was just crying because it was so heartbreaking and beautiful, and so like I was just experiencing so many emotions, and I was just so emotional reading it, and it was so good. Lindsay Byron is a fantastic author. I just really wanted to add this because I read it and I haven't talked to anyone about it yet, because I don't know, I just haven't talked to anyone about it yet, and I really wanted to chat about it. I feel like I'm not wording myself properly, but basically I think what was so beautiful about this book, one aspect of the book that I thought was really beautiful was just the familial aspect, and the kind of traumas that came with the like family and stuff, and also it was so visceral and real and beautiful. This is also on like womanhood and growing up as a woman, where you are viewed and valued for your attractiveness and what you like can provide for like men, and how oneself might kind of indulge in that, because then you're in that situation where it feels good to be beautiful. There was a this is very loosely quoted, but Lindsay Byron wrote about how it was like she was already in her mother's stomach before her mother was born, and then she was in the grandma's stomach, and then I don't know if I'm wording that correctly, but it kind of reminds me of like the little dolls that you kind of stack or you kind of open, and then there's more little ones inside. It reminded me of that because this, like, she is morphed and formed by all the women before her and her long like lineage, I guess. While I'm on that note, I also finished another book today. It was very brief and very short, and I really quite loved it. It was The Little Prince by Antoine Saint something. I do not have the physical copy with me at the moment. I literally just came home from a function, not a function, I came home from studying with my friend, and I lent her the book because I finished it during school. But it was so beautiful and so sentimental, and I really, it made my heart feel like so warm, because I was reading this book on the cusp of my adulthood. I'm graduating from high school in a month, and I'm growing up and I'm aging, and it's really like sad but really beautiful, and it was really fantastic, and it was a really great read, and I read about it in my journal because it made me feel so many different emotions. Okay, partially this is loosely quoted because I don't want to expose my soul too much. I've just finished The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Guys, I'm 1/4 French. I feel like I should learn a little bit, but that's okay. It was so deeply sentimental and melancholic, but so very wistful. The Little Prince was a charming, sweet angel, and I'm viewing this book so woefully, like I'm full of woes. I'm interpreting it as a man on the cusp of death, revitalizing his charm and youth, a love for life, and wow, I cannot read my handwriting. It's actually terrible. I always seem to read books that tend to appreciate the sweet affections of life, the process and monotony, and essentially just loving the mundane. It's such a lovely book that touches upon love, friendship, connecting with others, and it makes me think of the hyper individuality we have assumed in our society, where we no longer think it's worth the effort to build connections and to give time and portions of ourselves to I talked about other things, and I was like, wow, I truly needed The Little Prince. It was so beautiful, especially since I'm on the cusp of adulthood. My impending graduation tears me apart, but I'll be okay. I'm so grateful to be reminded of others through the little things. So I gave an example in my thing. So if you watched my previous vlog, I went to Daiso with my friend, and I got erasers, and it was a pack of 2 in 1, and I gave one to her, and I have my own, so we're matching our erasers. And I wrote that my green eraser reminds me of my time with Saisha, and then I give other examples of other people that I will not divulge upon. But I'm just very sentimental at the moment. And then I think that was all that I talked about on The Little Prince. I think I'm rating this 5 stars. This year has been really fantastic for books. Everything that I've been reading recently, I've been really quite enjoying, but I think that's also because I'm realizing I don't need to be reading books that I don't enjoy. And I've been more lenient with myself on that. Like, I'm not really forcing myself to read books that I'm not really in the mood for. Next, I will be starting The Constellations of Philosophy by Alan Dubatin. Basically, I've talked about this book before. It was actually in my video of my TBR for 2025. This book basically just modernizes very significant philosophies from really important and well-known philosophers, and then puts it into, I guess, yeah, more modern and understandable and digestible categories, like, for example, lack of money, the pain of love, inadequacy, anxiety, the fear of failure, and the pressure to conform. I really want to get more into philosophy. I think I've been reading a bit of philosophy here and there, but I really want to develop a bit more of a fundamental understanding so that I can actually apply that a lot more into what I'm reading, so I can get a lot more. But yeah, okay, back to the outro, basically. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate you all. I love you guys all to death. Mwah. Thank you so much for the support on my kind of video about old technology and all that stuff, because I really didn't know how that was going to go, but I really quite enjoyed filming that video. I quite enjoyed geeking out about all the technology that I own. And for some updates, my iPod is fantastic and she's beautiful and I love her to death. I need to download more music, but she's great. And I was listening to Claro earlier. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I love you guys all so much. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.